roles and responsibilities can vary and be different based on the building level needs. So again, sometimes we hear from really big schools or really tiny schools, like, won't work for us because we're too big or too tiny. But the reality is MTSS works in any size building because the roles and responsibilities can be flexible. So again, it's about making sure those jobs get done. So again, if I go back to, does someone have access to building level data? It doesn't matter who that person is. It doesn't matter if they can be a school psych or a guidance counselor, but they can also be a teacher or really anyone else designated by the team. So team makeup, again, can vary depending on the school and the resources that you've got and the personnel. All tiers and all teams should have the building administrator, but we often don't ask them to actually be the facilitator of those meetings. Usually that job falls to someone else. And that person can be a variety of people. So I've seen guidance counselors, ISTs, school psychs. I've seen social studies or art teachers play that role as well. Because the facilitator's job is really to kind of make sure the team is moving along and meetings are effective in their use of time, and again, making sure that interventions are getting in place and getting in place with fidelity. And so it's important that the administrator is there to put their weight behind those decisions, but ultimately the decisions are team decisions headed up by a facilitator. So Tier 1 teams should be meeting monthly, and their biggest role is to look at building level data. So what you want in any area, whether it's academics or behavior, is that 80% of your students are performing with the proficiency that you want, most of the time just with general practices they're having in a general ed classroom. If that number is too low, then we know we need to work on some best practices universally. If we're hitting that 80% mark, then we know we're doing pretty good and we can spend some more time and energy on those kids that struggle. If you're talking about individual kids, you're not talking about Tier 1. Frequently they want to, when you think about kind of old school methods of child study and IST meetings, we jump right to those kids that are struggling, but we're not taking a look kind of universally our best practices in place to make sure that when we identify kids who are struggling, that those students are truly struggling and they're not just had less access to more robust instruction. So I always try to push them back to Tier 1 to think universally and make sure that best practices are happening everywhere so that we know those kids that bubble up and need additional help truly need it. Tier 2 teams are going to meet a little more often, maybe every other week or every 2 weeks. They're going to be looking at data with regards to groups of students. So of those students who maybe aren't making those benchmarks, what are some trends in that data so that, again, we can give pointed intervention. We don't want to just put kind of global interventions in place. We want to make sure that we're matching where the students are struggling with the interventions, that we're going to make sure we're hitting those targets. For Tier 3, again, we're looking at student-specific data. So again, you might have a smaller group of people, but you're going to have, again, administrator, someone with access to that data. Probably the specific teachers that are working with those students, and so that they can really speak to what's working or not working in the classroom. We want to look at the interventions that we have in place. Are we implementing them with fidelity? If not, we can fix that. And if we are, and we're getting the results we want, great. And if we're not getting the results we want, then again, we can shift quickly. That's why those meetings should happen every week. So again, we can shift quickly if we're not getting the results we want. So you don't need any special training to be a team member with regard to MTSS. Really what you just need to bring to the table is a willingness to problem solve around things and an expertise in whatever area you bring to the table. So you don't need specific training. The MTSS process it feels scarier than it really is, or it feels more cumbersome than it really is. Once you're kind of in there, I would say it's a simple process. It's not always easy, but it's simple, right? You're just looking at data, looking at who needs help, and then making sure we're putting structures in place to support those students. So you don't need any additional training to do that. And so I would say to folks, don't be scared to step forward to be a part of those teams if you're asked, or if kind of an all call goes out for volunteers.